I'm going to go ahead and call the meeting to order. Before we start, I'll read the public comment note. The Family Life Advisory Committee welcomes and encourages public comment. Registration to participate in public comment begins 30 minutes before the posted start time of the meeting. Public comment is not intended to be a question and answer platform with committee members. Generally, committee members will not respond to comments made. All those registered to give public comment will be granted 3 minutes and will be asked to complete comments when the buzzer sounds. A total of 30 minutes is allocated for public comment on today's agenda. Those members of the public wishing to share additional comments with the committee may do so by emailing blackinformation@fcps.org. Do we have, I think we have one public comment. We have Trudy Tibble.
Hi, everyone. Sorry, there's no microphone. I'm trying to speak up. I reviewed both the videos that are on the agenda today. I'm not sure if they're going to be approved, discussed, or how that's going to work, but I have a question or two and some comments. I will start with the video about the contraceptives, or how does contraception work. The video is okay. It's presented in a very clinical manner with all relevant facts. The only thing I wasn't crazy about was the little smiling sperm when they got to their intended target and the frowning sperm when they didn't get to their intended target. I just kind of thought that was a little bit ridiculous. As for the consent video, I didn't really like this video at all. I think the beginning of the understanding consent video is pretty atrocious. It compares giving consent for sexual activity to making plans with a friend, like invite them over. This is a quote, making plans with a friend, like invite them over to your house, take them to a movie, or go for ice cream, end quote. And then it says, quote, before you do this, you need to check to make sure they're cool with it, right? Same goes for sex. I think that's a pretty ridiculous and irresponsible comparison. The video makes it seem as if obtaining consent for sexual activity should be treated just like any other activity you may want to pursue with any of your friends. Then the video produces the age chart for consent, which actually I was just told, and I have a link that someone just sent to me on my phone, is actually factually incorrect. That whole chart, incorrect. So the only thing so that whole thing is just wrong. The video makes it seem like as long as you're doing everything adhering to the age guidelines in the chart, that everything's just hunky-dory, and that's not okay for our kids. Then the video says to pay attention to body language. Quote, even if the other person verbally says yes, if their body language says no, you do not have consent, end quote. The video doesn't go into any other specifics about body language and how to tell if that body language is saying yes or saying no. Doesn't say anything else about it. Then the video continues with the question, quote, so how do you get consent, end quote, as if saying, if you hit this roadblock and you're not sure whether you have consent or not, here's what you need to do to get consent. Quote, you ask for it, end quote. Like it's just that plain and simple, just like anything else you do in your day. Quote, is this okay with you? Or do you want to do this, end quote. It's like asking somebody, do you want to go to the movies or do you want to go to the mall? Like it's just that simple. I don't like that in the video at all. I think that's irresponsible for our kids. And then there's the question, and how do you give consent? That's quote, and how do you give consent, end quote. Quote, you clearly agree by saying yes or using another positive statement like, quote, sure, let's do this. I'm not a fan of that at all. That doesn't seem responsible for what we want to do. Okay, I'm losing out on time. Sex without consent is sexual assault, and that is not cool. I think at some point in the video, there should be a teacher that says, this is what the jail time is going to look for a conviction of a sexual assault. And since the chart is completely wrong, and I have the information as to what is actually correct for the age of consent in Maryland. I'm going to be sending that to the Board of Education, which I'm going to ask them to pass down to you all, so that you know what the actual legal statutes are.
Been 4 minutes.
Oh, it's been 4 minutes, thank you. Okay, so I guess that's it. Should I think? I just want to say consent should not be taken lightly, and I feel like the video does that, and we owe better to our kids. Thank you.
Sorry about the clock.
Sorry about what? Oh, the clock. Sorry about that.
Right, there aren't any other comments. Let's go around and we can do introduction of members. Looks like we have some new faces here tonight. So Robin, is it okay if we start with you?
Oh, sure. I'm Robin Seidel, and I'm the healthcare professional.
Wilhelmina Dawn, Catoctin High School student.
Kemi Daniel, Oakdale High School.
Amy Wilhelm, health educator at Walkersville High School.
Kate Majewski, Urbana High School feeder.
Yolandi Oladindi, at-large member.
Lockwood, principal of Market Elementary.
Jamie Hitchner, curriculum specialist for elementary health and physical education, as well as one of the staff liaisons to this committee.
And Jen Metcalf, I'm the community representative for Intimate Partner Violence Prevention, and I also have 5 kids in the TJ feeder area.
I'm Raven Jones. I'm from the Walkersville feeder area, and I have a daughter in elementary school.
Good afternoon, Brian Griffith. I'm the secondary health and PD specialist, staff liaison to the.
Good evening, I'm Ray Gallagher. I'm the Board of Education liaison to BLAC, and I have 2 elementary age kids in the Oakdale Center.
Good evening, Josh Bokey with the Frederick High feeder pattern, and I have a son who's a 10th grader at Frederick High.
Callie Zanarini, I'm with the Linganore feeder area, and I have 2 kids in that school district.
I'm Krista Hannon. I'm in the Middletown feeder district, and I have 3 daughters.
Jen Korth, Governor Thomas Johnson feeder district, and I have 2 children in that school district.
Rebecca Coyle, Health Department.
Randy Appleby, I have an elementary schooler at a Tuscarora feeder school.
Daphne Church, I'm 4th grader at Brunswick Elementary and the Brunswick High School.
Does everyone have a copy of the last meeting minutes? If not, they're over on the table. So what we'll do is we'll take a few minutes to review those, and then if anyone has any updates or comments, we can make those changes, and then we will vote to approve them.
So I have a question. With regards to the motion to approve the full slate of officers, I have here abstain 0. So when we say abstain, what do we mean? Like you did not vote? I did not vote that day, so I think I should be recorded as well.
You were here?
Yeah. I was
Okay. Let me know. Thank you.
I have a comment. So this is on, I guess, page 3, and this is the first set of bullet points, the one that says, do FCPS teachers gather feedback survey data from students on various health lessons? And it says, it's not quite clear to me. It says the answer is with curriculum writers, not system-wide. So is that saying that FCPS teachers gather feedback from the curriculum writers, but not system-wide from all teachers? Because that answer does not really answer the question.
So just in more detail, our curriculum writers are teachers. And so typically as they implement the new lessons and things like that, they collect information from their students. But there is nothing in place system-wide where teachers are mandated to collect feedback from students on specific lessons.
Right, so the curriculum writers collect feedback from students as they write the curriculum. But the way it's worded, it's not clear.
Yeah.
So it could be misinterpreted to mean that they collect feedback from curriculum writers. It's not clear.
We could edit that to say, staff who write curriculum collect feedback, just because that's the point that people are reading, they might not. We can verify that.
And likewise, the next bullet point, the one that says, how do we ensure information has been retained? And I know we had this discussion, so if you didn't watch the video, you may not understand what that answer means. Do you get what I'm saying? So this is the next question, just says assurance with change in knowledge. What does that mean? So just some edits to that one as well.
Are there any other edits or clarifications or additions that anyone?
About the statistics on page 3. Statistics on the number of opt-outs in Frederick County, and talked about at the top. My only question was, do you track, I know people that that actually pulled their kids. I personally know people that did that. So there's no way of tracking if they were opted out, but you could track by absences. So I don't know, so I guess what I'm saying is there could be a little bit of discrepancy there. So I'm just putting it out
For
there.
the parents that did not opt their kids out, but
they pulled them out
withheld
of
them,
school
kept
or
them outside that
like
day.
absence.
Yeah,
So I feel
so
like it's not a real clear, whatever, I don't know what the opt-outs are, the answers to that, but you can't count that, or,
Yeah.
I mean, I guess you would have to really think there. So it doesn't give you a clear view, I feel like, of who actually opted out. I don't know, I just said it's all in two places, and it made me think. Where's that?
yeah.
Any others? So just to review, we're editing on page 2, the vote to approve the slate of officers to 1 extension. On page 3, we are editing bullet point 4 and bullet points 4 and 5 to further out explain what we mean by curriculum writers, just make that more clear. And then also clarifying how assurance with change in knowledge is measured. And then the final bullet point on that page, adding an asterisk or something, just again to note that this is not able to track the number of students who are not opted out, but who are pulled out of school on those days by parents. So it's a number, but it might not be the full picture. So those are the changes that are made. Are there any others before we?
Move to approve the minutes as amended.
I second that.
So the minutes as amended are approved.
We gotta do it.
Oh, thank you. Yes, we can vote. Everyone in favor of approving the, I always forget. If you can raise your hand if you vote to approve the amended minute. Just leave them up for a second, please. Any votes against? Any votes to abstain? Thank you. So those are approved. Do you have any old business?
No.
So now I'm going to turn it over to Ray Gallagher.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. I'm going to give just a little overview I think we shared at the last LAC meeting that the Board of Education was scheduled to have a discussion at our October 11th meeting about the process, the approval process for resources that come through the Family Life Advisory Committee. So for those that are new, or just to offer a little bit of background, and all of this is on board docs for the October 11th full board meeting as well. Can you hear me over there? Good. Okay. Just making sure. If you want to dig a little bit deeper than what I'll share today. But essentially, in 2019, there was a change to the regulation in COMAR that regulated how materials were approved through LAC and through the Board of Education. And so previously, the LAC committee would review materials, they would make recommendations that would then go to the Curriculum and Instruction Committee, which is another, it's a staff committee that several board members sit on to review curriculum. And so the resources would be approved or recommended from this committee. They would go to the Curriculum and Instruction Committee for discussion and review. They would go to the Board of Education for review. It was quite a lengthy process to go from this committee to approval and then implementation. So when COMAR changed, actually 2 years after COMAR changed, the board had a vote to change the process for that approval. So essentially, resources would come to FLAC, be reviewed and approved directly in this committee. So not going to the Curriculum and Instruction Committee and not going to the full board. And that was approved in 2021. So there were several members who wanted to revisit this conversation in particular, not because of any level of distrust of what was happening within this committee. I don't think at all. Some of the concerns that were raised during our discussion on October 11th really centered around wanting to ensure that you all, as volunteer committee members, didn't receive some of the backlash that the board sometimes receives around approving resources, and particularly because of some of the sensitive nature of Family Life Advisory issues, which you all know. I think having served on this committee, the board had some genuine concern around whether you all might receive some of the negative feedback from the community. So after a pretty lengthy, and part of the change also shifted. So previously, the Board of Education member that sat on this committee and the student board member did not vote on any of the resources here in the committee, which you might notice I will no longer be voting on our minutes or any of the resources, because the board did determine that that we will take the resources recommended from FLAC and put them to the full board for a vote for approval. Now, our desire is not to slow down the process. We are hoping that the resources will come right from FLAC to the board and not go through that whole process of having to get on the curriculum and instruction discussion as well. So the discussions will happen here. You all will vote as you currently do, and then ideally they will go to the board at our next meeting or the next meeting after that, depending on our schedule, so that we're not slowing down the process. But ideally also, I think offering you all a little bit of protection as volunteer committee members. I didn't hear anybody on the board expressing concern about any resources that have come forward, just simply wanting to make sure that you all are cared for in this process as well. So that was the recommendation. As part of that, I am no longer a voting member of this committee. The board liaison will no longer be a voting member of this committee. I believe we determined that the student member would still get to vote, because currently in Frederick County, our student member does not have any voting rights. They vote, but those votes are simply recorded. And so the student member will continue to vote on resources presented here and have her voice heard as part of that. So I think attached to the board docs, and everybody has a copy of the current guidelines for Black. I don't know if it makes sense. I don't want to read any of these, but I guess open just to see if there's any points from Jamie or Brian that you really would want to hit on in terms of what this committee, the purpose of the guidelines. Hopefully you all are well aware of the purpose of Black, but I'm also happy to answer any questions or, have a dialogue about some of what the board talked about at our October 11th meeting.
Kelly.
Yeah, Kyle had a question.
Oh, thank you. I just want to voice, not really a question, but I don't know, it seems a little sad that it's going to go, and this is no personal reflection on any individual board, that it's going to go to people who are voted in, and not just here. And this is kind of like we're using our spare time. And I know you guys use your spare time. Board of Education too. And it's just we're not really answering. We want to answer to the kids that go to the schools. I feel like, ooh, I don't know. I don't love it, but I just want things to get through without any political input into it. And I feel like this kind of muddies the waters a little bit. So just my opinion.
Yeah, no, and I feel like that's fair, and I appreciate you sharing. I think that.
And I understand the concern as well. So
Yeah,
I get it.
There were some
I know.
difficult.
I was here
Yes.
in the previous year, 2 years. This is my third year on the Black committee, so I get it. I do. So, and I do thank you for that. But it's a hard balance.
I agree, and I think being in that discussion, and I can only speak for myself. I share and appreciate some of your concerns, and I don't want to diminish any of the good work that this committee has done and will continue to do, because it really is valuable. And I think that there's really no point of the board having citizen committees if we're not taking your input and recommendations to heart. And so it is really important for you to continue sharing those perspectives and the perspectives that you all hear as parents and community members in our schools. So I appreciate you sharing that.
Thank you.
I really understand.
Yeah. So I'm the new girl in the house, so forgive me if I have some questions that might be ridiculous. But I just wanted to act in a situation where we vote and the recommendation is taken to the Board of Education, and that's my understanding of what you're saying.
Correct.
And they vote otherwise. What happens in that situation? Does it come back here for us to revisit? What happens?
Yeah, that would be my my assumption and proposal is that if something goes to the board and it is not approved based on the recommendation of the committee, that it would come back here for further discussion and consideration. Because if you put something forward, and I'm sure there will be information shared about what those resources are. If that is voted against at the full board level, it would come back to this committee for further discussion or consideration of additional resources to meet that particular need.
So if that happens and this committee is still pretty firm on our initial vote, how does it get resolved? I'm just trying to think through how we walk through to the Supreme Court. Who has the right?
Ultimately, the Board of Education is responsible for approving curriculum for within FCPS. And so ultimately, if there can't be a compromise or a new resource, then that vote at the board level is what will stand in terms of that particular resource or curriculum. That's within the board's responsibilities as elected members of FCPS.
So if you don't mind me asking, if the reason why this policy, I want to believe it's a policy, and forgive me if it's not, but was made was because we want to cut the process So like, I'm just trying to balance it in terms of like us, going back and forth, like how does that?
So what happened with the history is that there were times that it took 18 months for a resource to be identified by the Family Life Committee until it finally made it to the board for approval. And so we wanted to decrease that timeframe down. So we looked at, COMAR was updated. And so at that point in time, it no longer mandated that the board approve materials of instruction related to family life and human sexuality. So therefore, this committee identified with the Board of Ed rep at that point in time to make the adjustments that they would be the final approval of resources. Now, that just happened, and to be honest, I think one item actually has gone through during that process, because unfortunately, that was approved right before COVID. And so everything kind of went on hold during COVID, curriculum writing and kind of everything else. So there wasn't really a whole lot that was presented during that time. But I will say, prior to that being implemented, almost every item, I believe every item that was approved by FLAC that went to the board and went through the process was approved by the board for implementation in our schools. So I do not know of any items that were approved by FLAC that were not. So they can.
I said, I don't recall any time that the full board refused or rejected any of the things that were brought forward out of this committee.
Yeah.
Under the previous guidelines.
Thank you.
But to that point, those were different times. And I think prior to our first meeting here in 2022, right? It was, you had how many public comments? And so what my concern would be is that we get the comments here, we approve the stuff, and then it comes, and then the board gets those same comments. Are you going to be more swayed by the public comments or by the people? Because I don't know that the public fully understands what it takes to get on this committee. It's a vetting process, and everyone at this table brings a level of personal experience, subject matter expertise. The people are here because we know what we're talking about. And so my hope would be, I guess it's just a statement, my hope would be that the board that our vote would carry more weight than the people in the room who are making more noise. I guess would be mine.
And when you kick it to the Board of Ed, it becomes political. I mean, there's no disputing. And I'm not saying that you all, I'm not saying that you all are not there in the best interest of, but it is a highly contested race within this community. And, when you just said it took 18 months to get something, this is my second, I guess it's my first term, but second school year, right? That we started in September. And I see the wheels move very slowly, and which is difficult for me because, and I work in bureaucracy, so I'm not like a stranger to red tape and all that, but I feel like we should be getting things to the Board of Ed in less than 18 months. And I know we don't meet that frequently. There's only 5 meetings in a school year, really. Is there 5, 6 meetings? Yeah. So I'm just wondering, it takes that long to get something there. And then if there's the political, what goes on there politically and how heated things get at the Board of Ed level, then I just wonder when, by the time we approve something, 18 months in a clinical realm, terminology changes, everything changes. I mean, you can't, when I was looking at some of the stuff we were talking about at the end of last year, that stuff is rapidly changing, even within a year or so, things get updated. And if we're hitting things 18 months after, conceivably, I just, I want to make sure we're effective, and I worry then that it's going to get.
It should not be. So what the board has said, if various members on the board have said, President Johnson and others, it is not going to be like that again. So, and so I think you said there's not going to be a CNI committee. It's going to go straight to the board.
Correct. That was
Okay.
the motion and request at the October 11th meeting, that it would go straight from this committee to the board and not have to get placed on the CNI committee, the curriculum and instruction, and then to the board. And so hopefully that should expedite it a bit in terms of the timeframe and process.
Are there exemplars for how other school systems do it, or any kind of best practices that may be out there that we may be able to glean from?
To be honest, Jamie and I have both worked in other school systems. We are the exemplar. I'm
18 months, right?
no, not, and again, that's it.
We're gonna stick to that, right?
But our guidelines, how you all are appointed, identified, apply, everything else, that process is being looked at by a number of other school systems. They have borrowed our guidelines, how we do things, what we do, and everything else. Other school systems, there are some school systems that don't even meet for an entire school year. And so that means that there aren't any materials of instruction new inside of that school system being moved forward. And so how we have the intimate partner violence, the health department, the healthcare professional, how we have a representative from each feeder pattern, that whole membership stratus, school teacher and administrator on here as well. All of that, I've heard very good comments from other people, and they are trying to copy us. Again, not the length of time. They know, and we have talked about that. And I've shared that with other people. But if we have support of the board that says that's not going to happen, if there is something approved by here, they're going to try to get it on one of the next meetings. And so hopefully we will be looking at a few months versus many months.
All right, thank you.
Any other questions?
Just had a procedural question, which may not get answered here tonight, but just so that nothing is kind of resolved to assumption. Because Brian and I have been part of this committee for a while now, and the board makes several requests over that time. In terms of the guidelines, we just need to make the amendments that are consistent with what the full board has approved, because I remember there was, in previous boards, we had to discuss, we had to even vote among this group to move forward with recommendations back to the board. But we're just saying that we're going to update those, post them publicly for everybody to understand what the procedure will be going forward. Thank you.
Thank you for sharing and explaining and hearing from us.
Absolutely. Thank you for also sharing. And thank you for your service on the committee. I really don't want to diminish what you all are contributing to the school system. And so thank you for everybody who has served for a while, and for our new members as well. Your input is extremely valuable in this process.
All right, do you all want to evaluate some materials?
We have our first item for the school year to look at. Yes, please. So how we look at new materials of instruction.
This is just for the.
Okay, sorry.
So this is your evaluation sheet. This is what we take. So as we look, this is where your vote will be cast as well. The comments, if the material of instruction is approved, your comments on this document are compiled and given to the Board of Ed as well. So the Board of Ed will receive a big packet of, here's what the vote was, here's what people said, here's how everything went down, and everything else. And so that's why, even though they're not here, they do get a lot of the information that is shared by you all as we move forward. So as you look at this document, we are trying to look at, is this resource beneficial to the students in Frederick County? Again, every child, every day. So thinking about all of the different students that we provide services to. One of the other things, we can talk about implementation. If this item does get approved, basically what happens is I will reach out. So this item is for Health 2. Health 2, just as a reminder, is for our 11th and 12th graders. What I will do is I will reach out to some of my curriculum writers and just ask them, hey, how can we implement this? What are you going to do? And then they will develop some more resources in order to actually implement this, experiment, and then share it with some of their other teachers at various points in the school year. Luckily, we do have 2 points. We have a August Professional Development Day and a January Professional Development Day, where especially the Health 2 teachers will be spending a lot of time sitting together talking about lesson planning and things like that. Any questions about the items that are on here or anything else about the process? One of the things I encourage short videos. Again, studies show attention span 2 to 4 minutes. 45-minute videos don't do a whole lot of good. So these videos are meant as gotchas, as hooks, as just something to get the kids' attention so that the teachers can then do their job and provide instruction as well. Yep.
And you might have said this, but we will discuss it as a group before we do the final vote. So don't feel like you have to vote immediately. Just watch and then we'll discuss.
Thank you. There's probably going to be a commercial on this.
Tourists that turn into scientists. Tourists taking photos that are analyzed by AI. So researchers can help life underwater flourish.
Here's what has to happen for pregnancy to occur after sexual intercourse. Sperm must swim up the vagina, through the cervical opening, upwards through the uterus, and into one of the 2 fallopian tubes. If an egg, released during that month's ovulation, is in the tube, one sperm has a chance to fertilize it. Contraceptives are designed to prevent this process, and they work in 3 basic ways. They block the sperm, disable sperm before they reach the uterus, or suppress ovulation. Block is the simplest. Male and female condoms prevent sperm from coming into contact with the vaginal space. That barrier is also why they, unlike other contraceptive methods, are able to prevent transmission of certain sexually transmitted diseases. Meanwhile, the diaphragm, cervical cap, and sponge work by being placed over the cervix, barricading the entrance to the uterus. These contraceptives are sometimes called barrier methods and can be used with spermicides, an example of the second category. Disable. A spermicide is a chemical that immobilizes and destroys sperm. Today's spermicides come as foam, cream, jelly, suppositories, and even a thin piece of translucent film that dissolves in the vagina. These products can be inserted directly into the vagina before intercourse, or can be combined with block methods like a diaphragm or condom for added protection. The third category for preventing pregnancy works by suppressing the action of an egg maturing in the ovary. If there isn't an egg available in the fallopian tube, there's nothing for sperm to fertilize. Hormonal contraceptives, including the pill, the patch, the depot shot, and the vaginal ring, all release synthetic versions of various combinations of progesterone and estrogen. This hormone cocktail suppresses ovulation, keeping the immature egg safely sequestered in the ovary. Synthetic progesterone also has a block trick up its sleeve. It makes cervical mucus too thick and sticky for sperm to swim through easily. There are other contraceptives that use multiple approaches at the same time. For example, many IUDs, or intrauterine devices, contain synthetic hormones which suppress ovulation. Some also contain copper, which disables sperm while also making egg implantation in the uterus difficult. Block, disable, or suppress. Is one strategy better than the other? There are differences, but a lot of it has to do with how convenient and easy it is to use each contraceptive correctly. For example, male condoms would be about 98% effective if everyone used them perfectly. That 98% means if 100 couples correctly used condoms for a year, 2 women would get pregnant. But not everyone uses them correctly, so they're only 82% effective in practice. Other methods, like the patch and pill, are 99% effective when they're used perfectly. But in practice, that's 91%. Spermicide is only 85% effective, even with perfect usage, and just 71% effective with typical usage. Another important consideration in the choice of contraceptives are side effects, which almost exclusively affect women rather than men. Hormonal methods in particular can cause symptoms like headaches, nausea, and high blood pressure, but they vary from woman to woman. That's why these methods require a prescription from a doctor. The choice of contraceptive method is a personal one, and what works best for you now may change later. Scientists also continue to research new methods, such as a male pill that would prevent sperm production. In the meantime, there are quite a few options to block sperm, disable them, or suppress eggs and keep them out of reach.
Before you get to discussion, one thing I forgot to mention, even though your names appear on here, your names do not move forward in any public information. All the information is compiled, but no names are connected to any voting or anything else as we move forward. So the board does not know which members approved or didn't or said what or anything else.
Any comments or discussion? If you would just please raise your hand first so we can make sure we are documenting.
So I think the video is factual. It provides the information that is necessary. I understand the I guess the smiley face versus the sad face. But the way I understood that is if you're not, if the goal of the sperm is not met, then it has a sad face. Then if it hits the target or whatever, it has a smiley face. And I think that, in my opinion, is appropriate given the message being passed across. So those are my comments on it.
So like I said, I'm new in the room, so it's the first, can we ask questions? Okay. So I wanted to ask a question on what exactly is the goal of this video? The objective, what are we trying to achieve? What are we trying to pass to the students?
So, sorry.
No, this is your.
Sorry. I apologize, yeah. So we do have a contraceptive kit that we use. That kit is used in 8th grade, Health 1, and in Health 2. So some of the teachers were just looking for a video just to help kind of share the information. The teachers will still be using that kit and still be talking about all of the different methods, but they just wanted something as a quick introduction kind of before they actually did the instruction of all of the different methods for contraception.
So I guess the reason why I asked the question was watching the video, my understanding was, I think what I understand from it is we're trying to avoid, if I'm allowed to say, unwanted pregnancy, you don't want to get pregnant, right? Because I read the two lines right above that video, and I think that was what I could come up with. So I felt like there could be a piece of information missing in terms of abstinence, because in the video, they had explained that, using the block method would be effective or less effective by about 7% or 8%. For the abstinence, it's 100%. So if the message we're trying to pass is the effectiveness of the 3 contraceptives that has been listed here, I think abstinence is also one that we might just need to, look for a way to include here.
We are an abstinence-based curriculum. We do talk about that in all of our courses, starting in 6th grade. Abstinence is there. It was not included in this video, obviously, but it is what our teachers teach as the first and best method.
Yeah, I was going to just throw out a suggestion. Maybe what might be helpful is, Health 2 has a set of curricular standards that are required to be taught. And it might be good for maybe, for folks on this committee, particularly to see, okay, here's the curricular standard. This was the resource that was brought to this group to try to address that curricular standard. Kind of puts it in context, right?
Curricular standard is on the evaluation form up at the top.
Yeah, so the objective is listed, and then so this is tied to a specific objective for contraceptives specifically. So that's why this video doesn't mention that, because this is specifically talking about types of contraception and their effectiveness rates.
I was just going to say, this is contraception. So these are the forms that are that exist for contraception. When there is nothing in this video that has any judgment as to whether or not a teen or a young, whoever should get, or person in general should get pregnant. The judgment, the morality, the whatever you want to say is completely removed from that video, and it's factual content about what's available, the effectiveness, which I'm like, oh, that was, some of those statistics were interesting, which are good to know. So when you include, if we're gonna, like, abstinence doesn't have a role within contraception, and I'm not saying it doesn't have a place in the world or in what children are taught or exposed to, but this was specifically like a factual information about 3 forms of contraception. So when we enter in the best thing is abstinence, says who? Now I'm not saying that it's not the sure thing, but the reality is that our children, young adults, teens need contraception available. So if that's from that standpoint, to me, this addresses that specifically.
So just 2 thoughts. If the objective includes disease prevention methods, I think this is very heterosexual intercourse oriented, and so we're missing some of our kids here. So maybe if this gets approved, just the curriculum writers could frame that in some kind of a way. The other question is perhaps a bridge too far, and maybe this is intentional, but there's no mention of sort of emergency contraception, which is also part of the equation. And so I don't know if that factors in, but I want to throw that on there.
And again, I think this is really specific to a very, like, during.
Well, that's what Stephen's point, like the
And I think you're right, yeah, the further, the larger
Exactly.
content.
So I just think I want to be mindful of that.
Yeah.
So STIs, I mean, addressing those, would be a separate, is that a separate group, right? I mean, and I think it referenced that it can also be effective, like kind of FYI, but I'm getting this as pregnancy prevention through contraception, and that is the main, I mean, that's what this video is.
And to Brian's point, I think Brian did say that the purpose of the videos is to get students' attention, and the teachers are still going to instruct. Right. So this is just a hook. So I don't think we'll get a video that has 100% of everything, except if FCPS creates its own videos. Yeah. So.
Robin, did I see?
It was just, I thought for what it's supposed to be doing, I thought it was fairly well done. I wish they would have added a little more about the side effects of the birth control pills. That's pretty important, but then again, that should be the doctor's role. And one of the questions that was on my paper when they said, do you want to be on the committee, was about AIDS prevention. And so I just wanted to make sure that while abstinence may not seem important, it also prevents AIDS. And so that somewhere along the line, I'm sure that discussion is going to take place. And I'm just curious about what the 10th graders get shown.
So 10th graders don't have health class. It's there's a ninth grade one.
Okay.
And then they just last year started back with 11th and 12th graders receiving another credit. I think in an effort to like, let's give you a reminder before we send you out into the world. That's how I'm taking it. But so this is, which I appreciate. So the 10th graders, they don't have help. They get a year off of it. And then they can opt to either take it in 11th or 12th grade for that final credit.
I think for 11 and 12 graders, as you stated, I think is appropriate because of like that age level, and they get into that time frame where even as parents, we might not want them to, but you know, that can't be helped. So I think it's important for that level to learn that and know some facts about, because I mean, you can buy a condom, but if you don't know how to use it, it's useless. So I think that's appropriate.
I personally really liked how the video condensed a lot of the medical terminology, and I really do feel like teachers can take that ability to expand because some of the students walk in with not knowing a lot of the information that video condensed and organized. And just the questions you can pose and have just discussions and conversations, as well as the visual representation of was kids struggle, like they don't feel comfortable either. So I felt like it was appropriate visual representation.
And the smile, I agree. It wasn't happy I'm getting somebody pregnant. That is the function of sperm, right? I mean, like we're getting biological here. So that's to me, and I have a 10th grader and a 12th grader. And that is something that they would see and say, oh, I get that. It doesn't mean we're happy you're getting pregnant. It means that's my function in your body. And so
that's a good something.
Yeah. And I like the comment about it laid on how the onus or the effects affect the female. I think that's also underplayed in the world. And even if there was male birth control or contraception, if they don't take it, the female still gets pregnant. So I appreciated that. I mean, maybe that's my female in me. That was something that I think if girls heard that, that's an important message for them to know.
Yeah, I'm just curious. I'm out of date, I guess, because I never heard of the film before. But also, can teens get an IUD? Is that yes? Okay. They didn't talk about the failure rates for IUDs. At least I heard.
I think they did like a high level kind of. They kind of grouped them into failure rates, and that was one of my concerns too. Was making sure, but I think that's also, as the discussion goes on, is really talking about the failure rates, the risks for the different things. And I think that comes into Robin back. There's also lessons specifically on HIV and STI transmission too, because I know that the HIV prevention is one of the objectives. So it's, but I wanted to like acknowledge that point. That's an important one. And but yeah, I think another concern I had was, are the kids going to like phase out because it's too many statistics? But again, I think they're all important ones.
Yes. I think the statistics that were given, it wasn't that many. I think it was like the three, the high effective is the condoms and the other one. So I think those three, I don't think it's a lot. I think it's just enough to understand the best method or whatever.
Josh, I thought that the video was appropriate and thought it was really, it did a nice job informing and its outreach. But the question I guess I had is for students where English is a second language, and I don't have any insight into this, what are the resources? How does that work? This is great if I do speak English, and that's the majority of the students, but if not, what are the resources?
So, great question. And we know we need to do a much better job. One of the things, I believe TED Ed has the feature for closed captioning and different languages as part of closed captioning. But the reality is we don't have a whole lot of videos to support students of other languages. We do have one video for Health 1 that we do have an English version and a Spanish version on a male condom usage, but that's really it, other than the closed captioning speaking feature. So yeah, but again, the other thing is this is a 3-minute video, 4-minute video, so hopefully instruction supports that, but we do need to work on supporting all of our students inside that.
No, I appreciate that, and I appreciate that this is the tool for introductions for folks. There is, I can see the you know, sort of the necessity, right, that the video that is designed in what, you know, if your primary language is Spanish, right, it's the visuals and the language, it does have an impact opening up that discussion more than obviously closed captions. And also, I guess my only note I would need in terms of, you know, what going forward, you know, is it because the content doesn't exist, the limitations on the content, or how do we navigate that so that's there in the future? I know that's not a question for now, that's more future forward, but thank you.
No, I will say our multilingual educators, your Frederick feeder system or TJ feeder system, TJ school, they do work very closely together, especially with this topic as well. And so they have been, we do have my 2 teachers at both of those buildings are working very closely to make sure that the language barrier is not a barrier. Language is not a barrier to instruction.
May I just one quick comment? I think that was one of the reasons also why I loved the video, because I felt the visuals, even if you speak another language, the visuals help convey what the message they're trying to pass across, even with the smiley faces and the sad faces. So.
Any last comments, thoughts? I did notice, just from a personal standpoint, it's very gendered language. It talked about women getting pregnant, and I didn't love that, but I also understand, again, the options are limited to find a video that's going to check all the boxes. So that's just,
Well, I think you can have, I mean, there can be other, they don't have to not exist. I mean, I don't know if we're going to get them at some point, but safe sex does, I mean, this was just one aspect of it. So then there could be, you know, same-sex couples, STI. I mean, these are all different things that may not even, pregnancy may not even be in part of the discussion when you're discussing some of these other topics. So are we addressing those issues as well? Is that going to be falling under our, like,
We do not have any materials of instruction to address that.
STIs?
That is part of the objectives though. So, and what I mean is at this point in time, I have nothing on my agenda to bring that items that teachers have said, hey, can you get FLAC to approve this? So we have not been able to find any. Again, we are always looking out for other ones. We do have partnership with community activists and experts as well, and we turn to them and ask. And when our community experts say, yeah, we don't really like anything, I'm not going to be bringing anything forward as well. So if there is something that you find, anybody through their travels, we're happy to take it to my teachers, because there's not a lot out there. I'm going to be honest.
I just have one more. This is just so important. So you show this video, the teacher fills in maybe some blanks. There could be some discussion, whatever. I don't know how long they're allowed to do this. What happens then? What is told to the students then when they said, now what do I do? Now I've watched this video, what's available to me? What is the school system allowed to provide them?
So that is one of the things. One of the things with Health 2 is we want our students to be advocates. We want our students to be able to, again, the target age is 11th grade, but there are some 12th graders, but for the most part, we're trying to teach them schools, once they're outside of school, what can they do? Where can they go for help? Where can they go for everything else? So one of the things that we do point them to is the health department. That is where we point for other resources, but we also have suggested lessons where teachers talk about accessing contraceptive in the community. One of the things is the internal condom. That is part of our contraceptive kit. We do talk about that, but that is no longer as readily available as it used to be, and wasn't readily available in the past. So we have had to change some of those discussions about what is available and how to access. As Robin said earlier, one of the things that we do talk about is this is a question between you and your partner, as well as with a medical professional. So that's where and that medical professional might be going to the health department for.
And I just, teens and some people would consider children have rights to seek like medical care from professionals that they don't need another adult in the room to do in Maryland. So and I'm not saying we say, go do that, but are they presented factually at all anywhere in this that they can go to their doctor on their own and no one they are protected. So that's a barrier for a lot, children and I say children, I mean anybody under 8. So let's say minors and even young adults in the school system. But minors, they can get help and they can get medical consult on this kind of any of this stuff without anybody's knowledge. That's their legal right. So I just, is that something that if they ask, are they told that? Or is that something that we skirt around? Like, how does that addressed? Because I mean, without even just getting as specific as what's available, like the fact that they can go to a medical professional and the professional does not have to have a parent in the room.
And again, I think one of the things is that the easiestly accessible thing, going to a medical professional for all of our students. The reality is an external condom is the easiest.
Right.
Almost most convenience stores, big box stores, everything has those. So that is part of the conversation as to what is available, what can I go to, how can I go and get support for myself as well. And again, the conversation between the partners, and partners is the term, as well as medical professional, but again.
But I mean, in all reality, like a 15-year-old girl and a 15-year-old boy, I'm not sure they might be able to, we would hope they can communicate and talk and consent, all this stuff, but are they going to be able to give each other the best advice? No, I mean, not always. So I'm sorry, and I know I have a 15-year-old, so I'm not trying to be but I'm saying, like, I hope they know, my thing would be a child not being able to have an adult take them to do or get the help that they need. I wouldn't want that to be a barrier to them having access to safety, to options, so that they don't end up with unwanted or unplanned pregnancy, STI, whatever. So that's all. I just didn't know how deep you guys get if they ask, like, what do I do, Miss So-and-so? Where can I go?
I do want to get to the next video. So do we have other final thoughts, feelings?
I'm sorry. So I'm listening to you, ma'am, and as a mother with a 14-year-old, I'm having a moment. So you say my 14-year-old daughter or my child has a right to go and see a doctor on this without my knowledge.
Yeah, I believe the standard is there's no minimum. I thought it was even dropped from that. It used to be 13.
Well, so for mental health, it's 12. Like, children can ask to see
So who's
a
paying for
therapist.
this, by the way?
Well, that's the barrier.
Exactly.
And that's why it's
So, but there are services that don't, some places don't require fees.
Okay, I'm gonna sit over here and be quiet, because that just bothers me. But we'll go.
So that is one of the other things that we've talked about is parent workshops and having those opportunities. And hopefully, I think we can try to have one for the springtime. And again, not curriculum related, but how do I talk to my kid about contraception? How do I talk about puberty, about menstruation? everything else. So we would like to have that opportunity in the springtime, just, and I believe that needs to be a regularly occurring thing.
Some people don't know those numbers.
Yeah.
But I think another thing to keep in mind is that there are kids in the school system who don't have parents who are plugged in, who are taking care of them. And so trying to make sure that the kids who need that information, especially who don't have adults in their life who can advocate for them and take them.
And then we should be mindful when we divulge those type of information where, you know, you can go do this without your parent consent and all the stuff. It's just not, because God forbid you advocate for kids to go and do stuff like that, and when they get pregnant, then they come home to the parent. As opposed to, never mind, that's my personal opinion. I'll leave it to myself. We'll go to the next video.
And that's what we want, is we want to be able to ask those questions here and have this conversation.
It's okay. It's okay.
So we'll go ahead and take a minute, if you haven't already, like vote on this. And then we can,
This is the school.
so again, you're voting yes to approve or disapprove the contraceptive video. Same thing, we will watch the video and then we'll discuss. Gonna keep an eye on the time though, we only have about 20 more minutes, we do want to be able to.
Sorry, I'm sorry, I'm throwing everything at you. Take one.
Yeah.
Thank you. And again, this is for Health 2 in high school, 11th and 12th graders. 11th, 12th graders.
So, sorry, and I apologize for not saying before that the objectives are.
Consent is a pretty simple concept.
So I do apologize. So this one up at the top, you see, it is for Health to 11th and 12th grade, the date, and there are the 3 objectives that we are looking at. Just as a reminder, consent is taught every single year as mandated by state law.
Consent is a pretty simple concept. Say you want to make plans with a friend. Like invite them over to your house, take them to a movie, or go for ice cream. Before you can do this, you need to check to make sure they're cool with it, right? Same goes for sex. Before you start any sexual activity with someone, you need to make sure they understand and agree to participate in that sexual activity. Sexual activity includes kissing, touching, and sexual intercourse of any kind. So, what does consent look like? Consent is asking the other person for permission before you start any sexual activity. Consent is a verbal, voluntary yes, with everyone agreeing to the activity. And consent is done in person before the act and part of an ongoing conversation. Consent can also depend on how old you and the other person are. So take a moment to read this chart and make sure you understand the close-in age consent laws and how they apply to each group. It's also important to know if someone is drunk, high, or asleep, they cannot give consent. Pressuring someone into sexual activity does not mean you have consent. And not hearing a no does not mean you have consent. Be sure to pay attention to body language. Even if the other person verbally says yes, if their body language says no, you do not have consent. So how do you get consent? You ask for it. You say, is this okay with you? Or do you want to do this? It might feel a bit awkward, but it's important to respect the other person's boundaries. Always ask for consent and always respect the answer. And how do you give consent? You clearly agree by saying yes, or using another positive statement like, sure, let's do this. So remember, yes means consent, and it's always okay to say no. You can also change your mind at any time. So even if you say yes, if at any point you start to feel uncomfortable, you can withdraw consent and say no. And no always means no. Sex without consent is sexual assault, and that is not cool. But communicating with the other person every time you take part in sexual activity and every time you change the type of sexual activity is cool. So always ask the question. Keep asking the question and respect the answer. And always make sure you and the other person both understand and agree to what you're doing. If you have any other questions about consent, be sure to talk to your parent, teacher, or a trusted adult.
So I don't hate this video, but I don't love it either, because it's, especially the point where it says, ask for consent and keep asking. And I get what they're saying. Like, I, as a grown-up, understand that they're saying, as things change, keep asking for consent. But that can also come across maybe to a less developed mind as keep asking all the time, even if they say no over and over and over, just keep asking. So I kind of don't like that part of it. And the graphics were jarring for me, again, as an old person.
Yeah, it's too much flash.
Yeah, maybe that was okay for teenagers, like, I don't know, but it was a lot.
I just felt like it was lacking nuance. Like, it's overly simplistic, and I think we all know that it's never that simple. The situation they're gonna be in at their age is never as simple as, hey, would you like to have sex now? But that's, the video kind of gives it off as this, it's gonna be that simple. And I would like to see something that has more nuance. So I think the age group that this is going to is old enough to discuss that nuance of those situations, so. It's mine.
Definitely.
So just a very quick Google, I'm not an expert, but if the age of consent is Maryland, as Google is 16 in Maryland, as Google is telling me, then that grid is a problem.
Because it's a Canadian, it's a Canadian
Right,
video.
exactly. So I mean, we're giving misinformation.
Yes,
So I feel
yes.
like right off the bat, it's problematic, because that's based on Canada law.
Right, exactly.
Right.
So I feel like
I couldn't even read the whole thing. It went so
It was
fast.
Yeah, 12 to something,
Yeah.
16 to
Yeah,
something.
that's perhaps
That's
that's
so
right.
dangerous. I mean, oh.
But even if the teacher says these numbers are inaccurate, this isn't Maryland law, I think that can still be.
Nah, they're gonna still see the numbers and that's gonna stay.
And the authoritarian part. And the other thing is, well, if you say, that's not cool, no, that's racist.
Yeah.
I mean, let's call it what it
Consequences.
is. And, I don't think they're putting enough of they're making it too light of a very serious. I mean, everybody knows that their first sexual experience imprints on them for the rest of their lives. So let's not make this awful because people didn't understand what the laws are and I mean, some of those that grid, like you were saying, wow. I mean, that's saying that what a 16-year-old can, what was it, 2 years? A 19-year-old can be a person. It's just very, I just didn't like it.
I think I know Krista had a hand up too.
Well, I agree what you were saying. I thought it was just too lighthearted. Like, let's go for ice cream.
Yeah.
Is ice cream and sex the same thing?
Well, I know what they're trying to do.
But no,
It's-
yeah,
it's-
but yeah.
Make it easier to have that conversation by instead of making consent only about sex, make it just about these general interactions, but then it immediately went, so there wasn't like the transition.
Right, so it was a good catch, but it wasn't really, but the last thing I did like, the one thing I did like was at the end was ask to a trusted adult or parent or teacher. Like, I did like that.
The yes does not, she said over and over, yes means consent. That's actually not necessarily true. So I know that's confusing because you're supposed to be able to say, do you want to have sex? Yes, I do. And then everybody's happy and great. We know too well of many young people in situations where they don't feel like they can say anything, but yes, so that implication I take severe exception with. And that's not just the social worker and mom of girls of me, but that is, I have a problem with that. So, and yeah, the ages of consent and the legal, that has to be spot on with us in Maryland. It's not relative anywhere else, right? It needs to be here. And the severity of the consequences, I think, are not clear. Yeah, no against somebody who's or doing something that is considered rape and assault or whatever. Like, let's be clear, we're not mincing words. And it was just too fast. Like, I get that they were trying to, like, I mean, I know I'm not a kid, but that was
It's still
way,
too fast, right?
it was almost like, let's get through this because this is really uncomfortable to talk about. Like, so that's mine.
So I agree with all of
I'm
what's
like,
being
she
said.
finished her thought, but we kind of hijacked her.
Oh,
Yeah,
sorry. Really fun. My other thought is just I get really hung up on the listen to body language because not everyone reads body
That's
language.
it.
And what about our
Yeah.
neuro, like non-neurotypical kids? Like that to me is like, unless the curriculum's gonna really explain what that means, like that was trouble.
Well, and then how many of these kids are having these conversations via text?
Right.
You know, so the body language is.
It does start somewhere.
And I know it means like when you're actually like physically in that space with them, but still, I think that's a great point on that. Any other? We need to keep talking about this.
Yeah,
I feel like
It's clear.
We'll do like one more. Anybody have any other things though before? I don't want to cut anybody off. Everybody good? You can go ahead and.
I know, but I mean, I could probably put some movies.
What?
I said, I'll put some movies I could show. That better demonstrate.
Yeah.
I know, we can't do that.
We don't have the money to pay for that.
I know, that's right.
$10,000 infringement.
Yeah, Jamie, or somebody, we got.
And while they're finishing those up, I will say that the How Do Contraceptives Work video was approved 15-1. So we will be passing that on to the Board of Ed.
18 months.
Pat yourself.
We have about 9 minutes left, so while they're counting those up, are there any other items that people wanted to bring up, recommendations for future meetings, future topics of discussion?
We did request data on STI, updated information on STI for locals. The health department is working on that. They're coordinating with the state to try and get us the most up-to-date and accurate information. Anybody in data, unfortunately, with health knows that it is going to be a few years old, but they are trying to compile that. They're not sure when it will be done. But they are working on it. So hopefully we'll have some updated STI, maybe by January, probably later in the spring.
I had another question going all the way back to Ray's discussion and getting things moved in quickly. Did the topic of Everett, they felt that the plaque should be more often? Did that ever come up more than 4 times? Or as necessary?
It was not part of the discussion, although I think that might be a discussion that would potentially originate here as part of the committee, but it was not discussed as part of that board discussion.
we want to be respectful of your time as well. That's why there are, we only have 5 meetings. We want to make sure that we're not, again, you are volunteers. We want to respect that. We thank you so much for doing this. So yeah, but if there is a discussion at the 4th meeting that you would like to have more meetings, you are the committee, so.
Well, that's a good point. I mean, if it takes a long time to get things done, I'm not saying I'm voting for you, I want you all to come back here, but if it means we're doing things and getting through things, maybe I would not be opposed to it.
Well, I think it would just depend on if we have something to review.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Review,
Yeah.
call it back, you know, maybe we could get it done.
Can we bring that up in the January 23rd meeting, since it's after the holidays and it's the new year?
Yeah.
The understanding consent video was disapproved with a 15-to-1 count, which is awesome. What a night. So thank you all. I really appreciate that discussion we had. I feel like that was very like respectful, but like a really good discussion. And again, I think it just, from my viewpoint, I think it just shows what a diverse group this committee is and why it works well when we are able to approve things, because we aren't like all thinking on, you know, we aren't of one mind and we all bring our different experiences and viewpoints to the table. And I think that's really important. And I think that's why this committee is important. So thank you all for being willing to share and ask the questions and have those discussions. I really appreciate that. So.
Yeah, I didn't want to share because just based on that chart, I didn't think the video worked, but I did like it. And I just wanted, are we able to like mention videos that we've seen? There was a really good video that went around.
I can for sure send those to Brian. Absolutely.
Yes. I was just looking it up on my phone. That's a really good.
Which one?
The T one?
The T one.
That's approved. Yes.
Okay.
We already use T. The videos for consent that we already have are cup of tea. 2 minutes will change the way you think about consent, which is a discussion of the person's holding a phone. Can I borrow your phone? No, you can't. And it's a whole discussion there. And then at the middle school level, I believe there is an extremely short video, and I forget what it's called. It's the one with a pineapple and an orange. If anyone's seen that video, it's real quick. It's only a few seconds in length.
Just in on the T video, the one that students are shown is the clean version, and there's 2 out there.
Yeah, thanks for clarifying.
I think you should all look it up
Because I
later
came to
and
this
see the one with the F word. That's not the one students are seeing. There's an explicit language version of if you just Google T and consent. It's T, just the letter T.
No, cup of tea,
Like
T.
a cup of tea.
Cup of tea.
TA, yeah.
We'd include the links in the minutes as well.
Okay, perfect. Yes, yes.
Making sure that we have the clean version. Brian doesn't make
I
that
don't know,
mistake.
Brian, would you want to share the current list of approved videos?
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep, that's what we'll do.
So very quickly, I know Brian had mentioned previously about some kind of parent forum.
Yeah.
Is that, can you speak, is that for the FLAC or
No.
something else? Okay.
No, that would get input from the FLAC on what would be some of the things that maybe parents would like to see in that presentation. But I believe that that's something that we've been talking about having for, actually right before COVID, we started having the conversation with one of our partners to have that opportunity presented to parents, and then it kind of got tabled. Last year we did on this committee try to talk about some topics and what might be good, but hopefully we are moving forward with trying to get something done. So that could probably be a discussion at our January 23rd meeting as well.
Okay, we can talk about it because I was just wondering what the intent is. Is it for parent, what's the intent? What would be the intent? Has that been decided? And I was just thinking about it within the context of all the conversations we're having. And in particular, thinking of parents that have, that speak other languages, right? They may even have a difficult time talking about this with their kids. So like some of the struggles they may have, I'm just trying to do like get some sort of feedback from them about what would be needed. So that's going to be within the broader scope of what could be included in the potential parent forum. So that was just where my head was going with that, and what Jennifer said earlier when she was talking about, some parents not knowing that your kids can actually go to see a doctor without them.
I think the context around these materials when we review them is so important. Like, I know that the team here, lives and breathes all of this curriculum, but I think if you can add maybe 5 more sentences at this, as the setup, and for me, that would be really helpful, just to know, oh, there are already 4 approved videos, or we always cover this within the context of X, Y, and Z. I think that would just kind of be.
Maybe Brian, I could go in the email out, just the link back to where that is.
Yeah.
Mhm. Good ideas.
Right, any other final thoughts? We have 2 more minutes. Everyone good? Is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Can I get a second?
I second.
I say, third.